All right, let's dive in. Zen. It's a big one, right? You've got me looking at excerpts from Alan Watts' The Way of Zen. And wow, this is going to be dense. But that's why they call it a deep dive, I guess. So,
Yeah.
Zen, what is it?
Well, Watts starts in a really interesting place. He talks about this creative burst happening in the West right now. Psychology, science, even communication, all these fields kind of bumping up against the same questions that Zen has been wrestling with for centuries.
Yeah, it's like we're rediscovering this ancient wisdom, but through a totally different lens. Watts calls it a parallelism, which I think is a perfect word. But then he drops this little bombshell.
Mm,
He's not a Zen Buddhist himself.
yeah.
Why make that distinction up front?
Perspective, maybe. He's not speaking as a Zen master or anything, more like a super curious outsider trying to wrap his head around this whole thing. And I think in a way that makes him a better guide for us.
Right, like he's our Zen Sherpa or something,
Right.
leading us through this unfamiliar territory. And one of the first things we encounter is this tricky relationship between Zen and language.
Tricky is putting it mildly. I mean, we need words to talk about anything, right? But Watts argues that language can trap us. We get stuck in labels and roles when Zen is all about this constant flow, this ever-changing reality.
It's like we're trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
Mm.
And then Watts brings up the Chinese language. Words can be nouns and verbs all at once. It's not about static things, but about action, process, constant change.
Exactly. That fluidity is a key idea here. And it ties into this other fascinating concept Watts talks about, the peripheral mind. It's like, you know how your peripheral vision works? You're not directly focused on it, but you're still taking in information.
Oh yeah, like driving. You're not staring at the sidewalk, but you're still aware of it.
Right. And Watts suggests that Zen is about tapping into that peripheral awareness. Our minds are doing all this amazing stuff all the time without us even realizing it.
So Zen is about getting out of our own way, quieting that constant mental chatter. Which brings us to another interesting idea. Wu-wei, not doing. Isn't that just a fancy way of saying be lazy?
Huh. Not quite. Think of it more like effortless action. Like when you're so absorbed in something, you lose track of time. Flow state, you know.
Okay, I get that. Like getting lost in a good book.
Ah.
Hours just disappear. But Watts also throws out this phrase, cultivating a special kind of stupidity.
Yeah.
How do you even do that? It seems so counterintuitive.
I think it's about quieting that inner critic, that voice that's always analyzing and judging, not actual stupidity, but a deeper kind of knowing. He connects it to this idea of wuxin, or no-mindedness.
No-mindedness.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image, like a blank slate almost.
Well, not exactly empty, more like free from the grip of the ego. And when we achieve that, Watt says, this natural virtue can emerge, this effortless skill and creativity that flows from spontaneous action.
So that artisan Watts describes who can draw a perfect circle freehand. They're not overthinking it, they're just doing pure flow. But Zen also challenges how we view the world itself, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Watts brings up this concept of Maya illusion. It's not saying the world is fake, but that our perceptions are inherently limited. We cling to labels and categories when reality is fluid, interconnected, always in flux.
That's like those optical illusions. You see one thing, but it's actually something else entirely. Our minds playing tricks on us.
Maybe not. More like our minds create this illusion of separateness when in reality everything is connected and constantly changing.
Okay, that makes sense. But if everything's in flux, how do we even talk about goals and progress? Those feel like very linear concepts. Does Zen just toss those out the window?
That's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of how Zen views time. Instead of a straight line, it sees every moment as both a beginning and an end. So we're back to goals and progress, right? These very linear ideas.
Which Zen kind of flips on his head. Like you were saying, every moment is both beginning and end. Doesn't that make everything feel kind of pointless, though?
Not pointless exactly. It's more about where we put our attention. Instead of always chasing some future achievement, Zen says, hey, be present. Be here now. This moment is complete in itself.
Okay, so instead of always looking toward the horizon, we stop and appreciate the view. Right here, right now. But how do we actually do that? What's the Zen path to getting there?
It's not so much a path as a direct pointing. You know, Zen is all about direct experience, not intellectual understanding. It's that aha moment of insight, not something you can get from a book.
Which makes me think of those Zen mondos, those question and answer things that are supposed to trigger some sudden realization.
Yeah.
Like that story Watts tells about Fa Yen and the monk who thought he understood what is the Buddha.
Oh yeah, classic example. The monk had the concept down pat, but Fa Yen called him out. He was still clinging to an idea. Zen is about intuitive understanding. It's not intellectual.
It's like trying to explain what chocolate tastes like.
Right.
You can use all the words in the world.
Yeah.
But until you actually taste it, you don't really know. So Zen isn't about becoming some enlightened being. It's more like recognizing that Buddha nature that's already there within us.
Exactly. And that realization spills over into everything. Art, gardening. Watts even talks about the way of tea.
Wait, the way of tea. Now I'm really curious. What's so Zen about making a cup of tea?
Think about the Japanese tea ceremony, Chano-yu. It's super ritualized. Each movement has this awareness and intention behind it. It's bringing that Zen mindfulness to the simplest things.
You know, that actually makes sense. When I'm stressed out, if I take the time to really make tea properly, notice the warmth of the mug, the smell, it does center me.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Cultivating presence, plus the setting itself is important. Traditional tea rooms are very minimalist, like Zen gardens.
Oh yeah, those rock gardens.
Mm.
They're like these miniature landscapes. But they're not trying to be realistic representations of nature, are they?
Nope. It's about evoking the essence of nature, using minimal elements, a few rocks, some raked gravel. And just like the tea ceremony, it encourages you to slow down, contemplate, appreciate.
Like those haiku poems Watts talks about.
Yeah.
So much said in just a few words. And speaking of which, Watts emphasizes how Zen isn't just sitting and meditating, it's about finding that Buddha nature in every aspect of life.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the arts. Look at some dynasty landscape paintings. There's this incredible sense of emptiness, a focus on negative space that invites the viewer to participate in the experience.
So it's not just about what's there, but what's not there. The emptiness itself becomes meaningful.
Exactly. And that principle applies to other art forms too, like haiku with its minimalist structure, encourages us to look at the world with fresh eyes, find the beauty in the ordinary, the profound in the everyday.
It's like Zen is constantly reminding us. Enlightenment isn't some far-off goal. It's about waking up to what's already here, right now. But man, sometimes that feels harder than climbing Mount Everest.
It's definitely a journey, not a destination. And Watts reminds us it's not about striving to become something we're not. It's about recognizing we already are everything we need to be.
That's a comforting thought. But how do we tap into that? How do we stop striving and just be?
Maybe the key is trusting the process, allowing ourselves to travel without point with nowhere to go, as Watts says.
So as we wrap up this part of our Zen exploration, we're left with this question. If Zen is about embracing the journey without a fixed destination, how do we actually live that way? I mean, traveling without point sounds great in theory, but in practice, my to-do list would like a word.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Bringing these big ideas down to earth into our everyday lives. And maybe it starts with a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
You know, instead of fixating on outcomes, on always trying to get somewhere, what if we focused on the process itself?
So instead of stressing about reaching the top of the mountain, we enjoy the climb, take in the scenery along the way. Sounds nice, but easier said than done right. We're kind of programmed to think in terms of goals and achievements.
It definitely takes practice. But think about the rewards. When we let go of that rigid attachment to outcomes, we open ourselves up to so much more. The richness of each moment, appreciating the little things, the unexpected detours, even the mistakes, we learn from it all.
It's like those times when you're totally absorbed in something. Music, cooking, even just a good conversation. And you completely lose track of time. You're just there in the experience.
Exactly. And those moments tend to bring a real sense of joy, fulfillment. You don't get that same feeling when you're laser focused on the end goal. It's about embracing the suchness of each experience, like Watts says.
Suchness. I
Yeah.
love that word. It's like acknowledging things as they are without trying to force them into some predefined box.
Yeah.
But how does that actually play out in our daily lives? We can't all just quit our jobs and become Zen monks.
Right. It's not about making these huge changes, more like subtle shifts in awareness. Maybe taking a few deep breaths before you start your day, really savoring that first cup of coffee instead of gulping it down on the way out the door. It's about bringing a little mindfulness to even the most ordinary tasks.
So it's like sprinkling a little Zen dust on our everyday lives, finding those pockets of stillness and appreciation amidst all the chaos. But it still feels kind of paradoxical. If Zen is about traveling without point, doesn't that contradict the whole idea of having a meaningful life?
That's where the real depth of Zen comes in, I think. It's not about rejecting goals or ambition altogether. It's about approaching them with a different mindset, recognizing that the journey is just as important as the destination, maybe even more so.
So it's not about giving up on our dreams. It's about holding them lightly, being open to the unexpected detours, letting intuition be our guide.
Exactly. And in that letting go, in that surrender to the present moment, we might just find a deeper sense of purpose and meaning than we ever imagined. Because when we stop striving for something outside ourselves, we tap into this incredible well of wisdom and creativity that's already within us.
Well, that's a powerful thought. It's like Zen is offering us a whole new way of being in the world.
And it's a lifelong exploration, like Watts says. The true nature of reality is always unfolding, moment by moment. It's up to us to pay attention, cultivate that open awareness that allows us to see the world with fresh eyes.
Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on. We've explored how Zen looks at language spontaneity, the illusion of separateness, and this idea of direct experience as the path. We even touch on how those principles can show up in everything, from making tea to appreciating art.
And it all comes back to this. Zen is an invitation to wake up to the reality that's already here, to recognize our own Buddha nature, and find that peace and clarity in the suchness of each experience.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I want to thank you for being such a great guide through this world. And to our listeners, I hope you'll continue to explore these ideas. Read Watt's book, try meditating, maybe even a tea ceremony. See where this Zen path takes you. You might be surprised by what you find.
Indeed, the journey awaits.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Zen. And until next time, may you find moments of peace and clarity on your own unique journey.
Follow the infinite within with Cecilia to explore profound insights on pantheism. Embrace the oneness of existence and unlock the mysteries within you.